Sometimes the hardest thing about being a parent is feeling like you've failed before you've even begun. Calder knew that feeling well. A single father with empty pockets and nowhere left to turn. When he inherited his late father's house on a crumbling cliff, he thought it was just another reminder of abandonment. But on his first night there, he walked to the edge and saw something strange below, a hidden staircase carved into the rock. He climbed down and found a rusted iron door. Behind it was a small cavern, filled with old journals and photographs. They told a story he never knew, his father's secret work to save their dying town decades ago. What was his father hiding and why? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. 3 days earlier, Calder's old pickup truck had rattled down the coastal highway with a sound that reminded him of everything falling apart. His daughter Bryn slept in the passenger seat, her 8-year-old face pressed against the window, breath fogging the glass. She'd been so quiet lately, too quiet for a child her age. He knew she felt the weight of their circumstances, even if she didn't have words for it yet. The inheritance letter had arrived 6 weeks ago, forwarded 3 times before it found him in the cramped apartment above the laundromat. Warren Moss, his father, had died 2 years prior. Calder hadn't known. They hadn't spoken in over a decade. Not since that final argument when Calder was 23 and angry at a father who seemed more interested in old papers than his own son. Now Warren was gone, and he'd left Calder a house. Just a house. No money, no explanation, no apology for the years of distance. The road curved along the coastline, and Ember Bay appeared below like something from a faded postcard. Population 847, according to the weathered sign. Calder remembered it being over 2,000 when he was young. The town clung to the shore the way barnacles clung to rocks, stubborn, weathered, holding on despite the erosion. He'd grown up here, left at 18, and sworn he'd never return. The cliff house stood at the northern edge of town, isolated on a jutting promontory where land met ocean, in a dramatic collision of rock and wave. Calder pulled into the gravel driveway and cut the engine. The silence that followed felt heavy. Bryn stirred, blinking awake. "Is this it?" "This is it," Calder said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. The house was a 2-story Victorian, probably beautiful once, now surrendering to salt air and time. White paint peeled in long strips. Shutters hung at odd angles. AV climbed the eastern wall, like it was trying to pull the whole structure into the earth. But the bones were solid, and the view was breathtaking. The Pacific stretched to the horizon, endless and grey-blue, powerful in its indifference. They climbed out. The wind hit immediately, constant and cool, carrying the scent of kelp and brine. Bryn moved closer to him, and he rested his hand on her shoulder. "It's big," she said. "It is. Why didn't Grandpa live with us?" The question cut deeper than she knew. "It's complicated, sweetheart." They walked to the front door. The key the lawyer had sent fit stiffly in the lock. Inside, the air was stale and dust-thick. Furniture sat beneath white sheets like sleeping ghosts. Calder pulled one away, revealing a worn leather armchair positioned by the window. His father's chair. He could picture Warren there, reading, staring out at the ocean, lost in whatever thoughts had consumed him. The walls held framed photographs, black and white images of fishing boats, crews posing with their catch, the town in its prosperous days. Calder recognized his grandfather in one photo, younger than Calder was now, standing proud on a boat named the Morning Star. "Can I pick my room?" Bryn asked. "Go ahead. Upstairs on the left. There's one that faces the water." She disappeared up the creaking stairs, her footsteps light and careful. Calder stood in the living room, trying to feel something other than hollowness. This house represented his father's life, and it felt like standing in a museum dedicated to someone he'd never really known. He'd lost his job as a marine mechanic 8 months ago when the shipyard closed. The divorce finalized 2 months after that. His ex-wife, Crystal, had moved to Arizona with her new boyfriend, leaving Bryn with Calder. He didn't blame her for leaving. Their marriage had been dying for years. But leaving Bryn had been unforgivable. Yet here he was, barely keeping them fed, living in that apartment where the ceiling leaked and the neighbors screamed at 2 in the morning. The inheritance had felt like a lifeline. At least they'd have a roof. At least Bryn could have her own room. But standing in his father's house, Calder felt the weight of failure pressing down harder. He was 35 years old, broke, and living in the home of a man who'd been a stranger to him. A knock at the door startled him. He opened it to find an elderly woman with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun, holding a casserole dish covered in foil. She wore a cardigan, despite the mild temperature, and smiled with the kind of warmth that immediately disarmed him. "You must be Calder," she said. "I'm Audrey Finch. I live just down the road. Thought you might appreciate a warm meal on your first night." "That's very kind." "Thank you." He took the dish, felt its warmth through the foil. "Your father was a good neighbor. Quiet, kept to himself mostly, but good." "I was sorry to hear when he passed." Calder nodded, unsure what to say. "I didn't know him well. Not toward the end." Mrs. Finch's expression softened with understanding. "He spoke of you sometimes. Said you had his stubbornness." She smiled gently. "He meant it as a compliment, I think. Warren was working on something important before he died. Never did finish it. Perhaps you'll discover what it was." "What kind of thing?" "Research, documents, history. He spent hours on it. Said it mattered." She patted his arm. "Welcome home, Calder. If you need anything, I'm the blue house with the yellow door. And tell that daughter of yours there's fresh cookies tomorrow if she wants to visit." After she left, Calder set the casserole on the kitchen counter and explored the rest of the house. His father's study was exactly as he'd imagined. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a heavy oak desk, papers organized in neat stacks. Everything precise, methodical. Warren had been an accountant before retiring, a man who lived by numbers and order. But what had he been working on? That evening, after a quiet dinner of Mrs. Finch's chicken casserole and putting Bryn to bed in the room with the ocean view, Calder stood on the back porch. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. The ocean reflected the light, turning molten. He walked across the scrubby grass toward the cliff's edge. There was no fence, just open space ending in a sharp drop. Calder stopped a safe distance back and looked down. The cliff face fell 30 feet to jagged rocks, where waves crashed and retreated in an eternal rhythm. And that's when he saw it. Cut into the rock face, partially hidden by ivy and erosion, was a staircase. Narrow, steep, carved directly into the stone. It descended along the cliff, switching back once, ending at what looked like— He squinted through the dimming light. A door. An iron door set into the rock itself. Calder's heart quickened. What was this? He looked back at the house, dark except for the porch light, then back at the hidden staircase. Against every reasonable instinct, he retrieved a flashlight from the truck and made his way down. The stairs were slick with sea spray, treacherous in the fading light. He moved slowly, one hand braced against the rock wall. The wind pulled at him, and below, the waves sounded hungry. At the bottom, he stood before the iron door. It was old, spotted with rust, secured with a heavy bolt that had corroded partially into its housing. Calder pulled. Nothing. He pulled harder, throwing his weight into it. The bolt groaned, resisted, then suddenly gave way. The door swung inward on protesting hinges. Calder aimed his flashlight inside. The beam revealed a small cavern, maybe 10 feet deep, carved or formed naturally into the cliff. And inside, boxes, shelves, filing cabinets, journals stacked in neat piles, photographs pinned to boards, maps, documents, all organized with the same meticulous care he'd seen in his father's study. Calder stepped inside, overwhelmed. The cavern smelled of paper and sea salt. His flashlight swept across the space. A wooden stool sat in the corner. A battery-powered lantern rested on a natural rock shelf. His father had spent time here. Significant time. He picked up the nearest journal, leather-bound, dated 1967 on the spine. He opened it carefully. His father's handwriting filled the pages, small, precise, measured. January 15th, 1967. The town council rejected my proposal today. They called it impractical. Short-sighted, one man said, but I know I'm right. I've done the research. If Ember Bay doesn't adapt, it will die. Not quickly, but slowly, painfully. The way a tree dies when its roots can no longer find water. I won't give up. I can't. Calder read the words again. Then again, his father had been trying to save this town. For how long? He looked around the cavern at the decades of accumulated work and felt something crack open inside him. Warren hadn't been distant because he didn't care. He'd been distant because he cared too much about something bigger than himself. Calder sat on the stool, journal in hand, and began to read. Hours later, when he finally climbed back up the stairs, the moon had risen, and his understanding of his father had fundamentally changed. This wasn't just a house he'd inherited, it was a mission left unfinished. Morning light flooded through the kitchen windows as Calder made coffee with shaking hands. He'd barely slept. The journal entries had kept him awake, his father's words echoing in his mind. After Bryn left for her first day at the local elementary school, arranged hastily by Mrs. Finch, who apparently knew everyone, Calder returned to the cavern. This time he brought better light, a thermos of coffee, and a notepad. The descent felt less treacherous in daylight, though no less strange. A secret space carved into a cliff, a hidden archive of one man's obsession. Inside, Calder began systematically examining the contents. The organization was impressive. Warren had labeled everything by year and category: town council, financial records, environmental studies, correspondence, personal reflections. He pulled a box marked 1983, critical year. Inside were copies of meeting minutes from the Ember Bay Town Council, dated March through June. Calder spread them across the makeshift table, a board laid across 2 crates, and read March 14th, 1983. Warren Moss had requested time to present a proposal. The minutes were dry, bureaucratic, but Calder could read between the lines. His father had stood before the council and proposed creating a fishing cooperative. Not just any cooperative, a comprehensive system of shared resources, sustainable quotas, direct-to-market sales channels, and community investment. The proposal itself was paperclipped to the minutes. 20 pages, typed, with hand-drawn charts and financial projections. Calder's chest tightened as he read. It was brilliant, thorough, visionary. The council's response was recorded in cold efficiency. Motion to adopt Moss proposal fails 5-0. Councilman Burke notes proposal is impractical and idealistic. Councilman Reeves states we need real solutions, not dreams. Calder found photographs tucked in the same box. His father standing at a podium, maybe 50 years old, wearing his best suit. The council members' faces ranged from bored to hostile. One man was actually laughing, but it was the margins of Warren's personal copy that gutted him. His father's handwriting, usually so controlled, became jagged, emotional. They wouldn't even discuss it. 37 years of fishing tradition in this town, and they won't consider survival. Why won't they see? And later, dated a week after the rejection, I understand now. They're afraid. Fear makes people cruel. But I can't stop. If I stop, I'm complicit in what comes next. Calder set the papers down and pressed his palms against his eyes. This had broken something in his father. He could feel it in the desperate energy of the notes that followed, dozens of journals, all documenting Warren's solitary crusade to prove his idea could work. He spent the next 3 hours reading through the archives. The scope was staggering. Warren had corresponded with marine biologists at 3 universities. He'd studied cooperative models from Alaska to Chile. He'd tracked fish populations, water temperatures, market prices, regulatory changes. For 40 years, and through it all, Calder saw his own childhood from a different angle. The closed study door, his father's distraction at dinner, the times Warren had said, "Not now," when Calder wanted to throw a baseball or talk about school. It hadn't been indifference. It had been this. A man consumed by purpose, fighting a battle no one else believed in. The realization brought no comfort, only a hollow ache. They'd lost each other over this. Over Ember Bay's future, Calder found a folder marked Personal, Not Council. Inside were letters, dozens of them, handwritten, dated across the years, addressed to Calder. His hands trembled as he opened the first one. Dear Calder, you're 16 today. I wanted to explain why I've been distant, why the work matters so much, but I fear you wouldn't understand. Perhaps someday you will. I hope you know I love you, even when I'm not good at showing it. Love, Dad. The letters continued, one for nearly every birthday and major life event. None had been sent. Dear Calder, I heard you graduated top of your class. I'm proud, though I have no right to be after missing so much. I hope the mechanic trade treats you well. You always had good hands. Love, Dad. Dear Calder, Mrs. Finch told me you got married. I wasn't invited, and I understand why. I hope she makes you happy. I hope you build a better life than I managed. Love, Dad. Dear Calder, a daughter. Bryn, Mrs. Finch said. What a beautiful name. I wish I could meet her. I wish I could tell her that her father is a good man, better than his father was. I hope someday you'll forgive me. Love, Dad. The last letter was dated 3 weeks before Warren's death. Dear Calder, the doctors say my heart is failing. Fitting, I suppose. I've failed at most things that mattered, except maybe this. The research is complete. The plan is sound, but I'm out of time. If you ever read this, know that I never stopped loving you. I just stopped knowing how to show it. Please understand what I was trying to do. The Bay is worth fighting for. The people are worth fighting for. I hope I'm remembered not for failing, but for trying. Love, Dad. Calder sat in the dimness of the cavern, tears streaming down his face, his father's letters clutched in his hands. All those years of anger, of feeling abandoned, and Warren had been here, writing letters he never had the courage to send. He didn't know how long he sat there. Eventually, footsteps on the stairs pulled him from his grief. He looked up to find Mrs. Finch's white hair appearing in the doorway. I thought I might find you here, she said gently. Bryn's home from school. She's having cookies at my house, but she was asking for you. Calder wiped his eyes quickly. I'll come up. Mrs. Finch stepped inside, looking around the cavern with sad familiarity. He brought me down here once, your father. Wanted someone to know, in case. He was so proud of this work. Why didn't he just talk to me? Why the letters he never sent? Fear, she said simply. Fear that you'd reject him the way the town did. Fear that his obsession had cost him too much already. Fear that if he reached out, you'd confirm what he already believed, that he'd failed as a father. He didn't fail, Calder said, his voice breaking. I did. I should have tried harder. Mrs. Finch sat beside him on a crate. The past is written, but perhaps the future isn't. She gestured to the archives surrounding them. Warren spent 40 years on this. He never gave up, even when everyone else did. There might be a reason you inherited more than just a house. What am I supposed to do with all this? I don't know. But I do know the town is in trouble. She pulled a folded newspaper from her cardigan pocket. This came out yesterday. Calder unfolded it. The headline read, Tidewater Holdings acquires majority waterfront properties. Development plans announced. He scanned the article. A development company had been quietly buying up property along Ember Bay's waterfront. They planned to demolish the old pier, build luxury condominiums, a boutique hotel, a marina for pleasure crafts. The article quoted the company representative, someone named Brent Holloway, promising jobs and economic revival. They're pricing everyone out, Mrs. Finch said. The families who fished these waters for generations can't afford the new property taxes. Can't compete with the money being offered. In 5 years, Ember Bay won't be a fishing town anymore. It'll be a resort for wealthy retirees. Calder looked at his father's research, at the decades of work, at the letters never sent. He thought about Bryn, about the town, about legacy and redemption. My father tried to stop this. Not this exactly, but the dying that led to this. He knew if Ember Bay didn't save itself, someone else would remake it into something unrecognizable. She stood, brushing dust from her skirt. The question is, do you? After she left, Calder sat alone in the cavern. The weight of the choice pressed down on him. He could sell the house, take Bryn somewhere fresh, start over again. Or he could stay. He could pick up the work his father died trying to complete. It was madness. He had no money, no influence, no reason to think he could succeed where Warren had failed. But as he looked at the archives, at 40 years of hope documented and preserved, he felt something shift inside him. His father had left him more than a house. He'd left him a purpose, and maybe, just maybe, a chance to finally understand the man he'd spent so long resenting. Calder climbed the stairs as evening fell, his father's last letter folded in his pocket, and made his choice. The next week fell into a rhythm. Mornings belonged to Bryn. Breakfast, walking her to school, trying to be the father she deserved. The rest of the day belonged to the cavern and Warren's archives. Calder approached it the way he'd approach rebuilding an engine. Systematically, one piece at a time, understanding how everything connected. His marine mechanic background helped more than he'd expected. Warren's technical documentation of fishing equipment, boat maintenance schedules, and maritime navigation made immediate sense. On the third day, he discovered Warren's hand-drawn maps. They were extraordinary, detailed surveys of Ember Bay's waters rendered in pencil and ink, showing depth contours, rocky outcroppings, kelp forests, and seasonal migration patterns of various fish species. His father had marked optimal fishing zones, spawning grounds that needed protection, and sustainable harvest areas. Each map was dated and annotated. Warren had updated them manually, tracking changes in water temperature, fish populations, and ecosystem health. It was the work of a scientist, not just a concerned citizen. Calder spread the most recent map across the makeshift table and made his own notes, cross-referencing with current data he'd pulled from the library's computer. The fishing grounds had shifted slightly with warming waters, but Warren's fundamental analysis remained sound. The town library became his second workspace. It was a small brick building on Main Street, older than most of the businesses that had closed around it. Inside, the silence felt sacred. Books lined walls that had held them for generations. Petra Voss. The librarian was maybe 10 years older than Calder, with sharp eyes behind rectangular glasses and graying brown hair pulled into a practical bun. She'd watched him come and go for 3 days before finally approaching his table. "You're Warren's son," she said. "Not a question. I am. He spent a lot of time here. Always researching, always reading. Polite, quiet, determined." She gestured to the town records he'd spread across the table. "Looking for the same things he was? Trying to understand what he found." Petra pulled out a chair and sat. "Your father was one of the smartest men I've ever known. He saw what was coming decades before anyone else did. The council thought he was crazy. Were you here in '83? For the proposal? I was 21, fresh out of library school, just started working here. I remember it clearly. Warren was so hopeful that day. Came back afterward looking like someone had died." She paused. "I suppose something had. His faith in collective wisdom. The town's in worse shape now than it was then. Much worse. Tidewater Holdings has been acquiring properties for 18 months. They're smart about it. Quiet purchases spread out so nobody realized the scope until it was too late. Now they own most of the waterfront." She pulled a folder from beneath her arm. "Recent town council minutes. Thought you might want to see them." Calder opened the folder. The minutes detailed Tidewater's official proposal. Demolish the old commercial pier. Construct a mixed-use development with 60 luxury condominiums, a boutique hotel, upscale restaurants, and a marina. Projected completion, 3 years. Projected jobs, 45 during construction, 30 permanent positions afterward. "That's nothing," Calder said. "There are over 100 families still fishing here. 83 families, actually. And they're desperate. Most are barely making ends meet. When Tidewater's representative offered buyouts at 20% above market value, a lot of people listened. Who's the representative? Brent Holloway. Moved here 6 months ago, rented one of the nicer houses on the hill. He's good at what he does. Friendly, reasonable, promises everything people want to hear." Calder made a note of the name. "My father had a complete business plan for a fishing cooperative. Have you seen it? He mentioned it but never showed me the full document. Said he was updating it, wanted it perfect before presenting again. I found it. It's comprehensive. Financial projections, operational structure, sustainability guidelines, market analysis. It could work." Petra studied him carefully. "You're thinking about finishing what he started?" "I don't know yet. Maybe. It won't be easy. This town has been hurt too many times. People don't trust easily anymore. I'm starting to understand that. She stood, then hesitated. Warren used to say something I never forgot. He said, "The truth doesn't care about timing. It just waits until someone's ready to hear it. Maybe that's now. Maybe that someone is you." That evening, Calder went to the town's one diner, a weathered establishment called The Anchor. It smelled like fried fish and coffee, and nearly every table was occupied. Calder took a seat at the counter and ordered the special without looking at the menu. 3 stools down, a man in an expensive jacket was holding court with 2 older fishermen. Calder recognized the type immediately, polished, confident, selling something. The construction jobs alone will support 20 families for 2 years, the man was saying. And once the development is complete, property values for everyone will increase. Your children will thank you for this opportunity. One of the fishermen, weathered face, calloused hands, shook his head. My children want to fish, like I did, like my father did. With respect, fishing isn't sustainable here anymore. The industry is dying. Tidewater is offering you a chance to transition with dignity, to be part of something new and prosperous. Dignity, the fisherman muttered. That what you call it? The man in the jacket smiled smoothly. I call it reality. Change is coming whether you accept it or not. Better to be part of shaping that change than being swept away by it. Calder's meal arrived, but he'd lost his appetite. He watched the interaction, saw the fisherman's resignation. The corporate representatives practiced sympathy. This was Brent Holloway, almost certainly. The face of Tidewater's conquest. After they left, Calder approached the waitress. That man in the jacket. Holloway? That's him. Comes in 3 times a week, always buys someone's meal, always talks about the future. She refilled his coffee. Hard to argue with someone who's buying. What do you think? About the development? She shrugged. I think I'm 62 years old and been serving fish to fishermen my whole life. I don't know what I'll do in a town full of tourists who want craft cocktails and farm-to-table dining. She smiled sadly. But nobody's asking me. Calder paid his bill and walked back toward the cliff house. The town felt hollowed out, like a tree that looked solid, until you touched it and realized the center had rotted away. Main Street had more vacant storefronts than open businesses. The old cannery stood empty, windows broken, gulls nesting in the rafters. The commercial pier sagged in the middle, held together by stubbornness and prayer. His father had tried to save this, had spent 40 years documenting its decline and proposing solutions no one wanted to hear. At home, Bryn was drawing at the kitchen table while Mrs. Finch washed dishes. They'd fallen into an easy arrangement. The older woman watching Bryn in the afternoons, Calder compensating her with repairs around her house and help with her garden. How was school? Calder asked, kissing the top of Bryn's head. Good. I made a friend. Her name's Yuki. Her dad has a fishing boat. She said I could see it sometime. Something stirred in Calder's chest. I'd like that too. After Mrs. Finch left and Bryn went to bed, Calder returned to the cavern. He pulled out Warren's correspondence files and began reading through letters his father had sent to marine biologists, economists and sustainability experts over the years. What struck him was how many had responded positively. Professors from 3 universities had reviewed Warren's data and confirmed his analysis. A fisheries economist from Oregon had called the cooperative model sound and replicable. A marine biologist had written, "Your documentation of this ecosystem is remarkable. Have you considered publishing?" His father's work wasn't the obsession of a crank. It was legitimate research, comprehensive and thorough. The tragedy was that it had been ignored because Warren was just a local accountant. Not someone with credentials the council respected, but the work itself, that was credible. Calder found Warren's most recent version of the business plan, dated 14 months before his death. He read through it carefully, making notes. The financial projections were conservative, almost cautious. The operational structure was democratic, 1 family, 1 vote. The sustainability guidelines were strict, ensuring the bay's health for generations. It could work. It really could work. The question was whether anyone would listen now when they hadn't listened then. Calder thought about Bryn's new friend Yuki, about her father's fishing boat, about a town full of people who'd been beaten down by decades of decline. He thought about Brent Holloway's smooth promises and the waitress at the Anchor who didn't know what her future looked like. He opened his laptop and started making a list. People to contact, research to update, questions to answer. It was nearly midnight when he finally closed the computer. Tomorrow he'd reach out to the marine biologist who'd corresponded with Warren. He'd start updating the financial projections with current data. He'd figure out how to approach the families who were still fishing. He'd begin the impossible work of finishing what his father started. Outside, waves crashed against the cliff in the darkness, patient and relentless the way his father had been, the way Calder would need to be. 2 days later, Calder made a discovery that changed everything he thought he understood about his father's sacrifice. He'd been organizing the financial documents, decades of tax returns, bank statements, investment records, trying to understand Warren's personal finances. What he found was a ledger, meticulously maintained from 1988 through 2020, documenting every dollar Warren had spent on his research. The numbers told a story of quiet devastation. Warren had hired consultants to review his proposals. $200 in 1989 for an economist's analysis. Marine biology surveys, $6,800 in 1992. Legal review of cooperative bylaws, $30,500 in 1997. Travel expenses to conferences, meetings with sustainability experts, purchasing research databases. The costs accumulated year after year, and the source of funding became horrifyingly clear as Calder cross-referenced the ledger with Warren's personal bank statements. His father had liquidated his retirement account in 1994. He'd taken out a second mortgage on the Cliff House in 1998. He'd sold his truck and bought a used one in 2003, putting the difference toward hiring an environmental impact consultant. Calder remembered that truck. Remembered being 17 and embarrassed when his father picked him up from school in that beaten rattletrap while his friends' parents drove newer vehicles. Now he understood. Warren hadn't been cheap or careless with money. He'd been funding a research project with his own life savings. A memory surfaced, sharp and painful. Calder had been 18, graduating high school, accepted to a technical college 3 hours north. The tuition wasn't enormous, but it was more than they had. Warren had sat him down at the kitchen table and said the words that had driven a wedge between them. "I'm sorry, son. The money's tied up right now. It's not available." Calder had been furious, had accused his father of not caring, of prioritizing his obsession over his own child's future. Warren had just sat there taking it, offering no defense. Now Calder understood why. The money was tied up in trying to save an entire community. Warren had been choosing between his son's education and research he believed could save hundreds of families. And he'd made the choice that had cost him his relationship with Calder. Sitting in the cavern, with his father's ledger open before him, Calder wept. "I'm sorry, Dad," he whispered to the empty space. "I'm sorry I didn't understand." He sat there for a long time, letting the grief and regret wash through him. Then he dried his eyes, closed the ledger, and made a decision. He would honor his father's sacrifice by making this work. Whatever it took, that afternoon, he withdrew $300, nearly a quarter of what remained in his checking account, and paid an accountant to review Warren's business plan. The accountant was named Faye Prescott, a semi-retired woman in her late 50s, who worked out of a small office above the hardware store. Petra had recommended her, mentioning that Faye had known Warren. "I remember him," Faye said when Calder explained his visit. "Quiet man, very precise. He helped me with my taxes one year, wouldn't accept payment." She took the business plan and read through it while Calder waited, her expression growing increasingly focused. After 40 minutes, she looked up. "This is excellent work. Conservative projections, realistic timelines, sound financial structure. The math is all correct." She paused. "Your father really knew what he was doing, so it could work." "Actually work? With proper capitalization and community buy-in, yes. The biggest challenge isn't the economics, it's getting people to trust it. She set the plan down. I'll tell you what, I'll help you refine this pro bono. Your father once helped me when I couldn't afford to pay. Time to return that kindness. The next step was validating the environmental data. Calder sent an email to Dr. Althea Kim, the marine biologist who'd corresponded with Warren years earlier. He didn't expect a response. She had to be in her late 60s now, possibly retired. She replied within 6 hours. I remember Warren Moss fondly. His documentation of Ember Bay's ecosystem was meticulous and ahead of its time. I'd be happy to review updated data. Send what you have. Over the following days, Calder worked to update his father's research. He contacted the current harbor master for recent catch data. He reviewed water quality reports from the State Environmental Agency. He compiled everything and sent it to Dr. Kim. Her response came back encouraging. The bay's ecosystem was stressed but stable. With proper management, it could support sustainable fishing indefinitely. One evening, Bryn came home from school, excited. Yuki invited me to see her dad's boat tomorrow. Can I go, please? Calder saw the hope in her eyes. It was the first time since the divorce she'd been truly enthusiastic about something. Of course, I'll come with you. The next afternoon, they walked to the marina, a ramshackle collection of docks where maybe 15 working boats still tied up. Yuki was waiting with her father, a stocky man in his mid-40s with weathered skin and kind eyes. You must be Calder, he said, extending a calloused hand. Hiro Tanaka, your daughter and mine have become quite the pair. Thank you for inviting us. Hiro's boat, the Kiyomi, was a 30-foot commercial fishing vessel that had seen better days, but was clearly well-maintained. The girls ran ahead, and Hiro gave Calder the tour, explaining the equipment, the daily routine, the challenges. Catch has been declining for years, Hiro said. Not because there's no fish, there is if you know where to look. But regulations keep changing, costs keep rising, and we're competing against factory ships that strip the ocean bare 50 miles out. What if there was a better way? Calder asked. A cooperative model where boats shared resources, coordinated sustainable harvesting, sold directly to markets? Hiro gave him a long look. You're Warren's son. I heard you were asking questions around town. My father spent 40 years developing a plan. I'm trying to understand if it's viable. Warren was a good man. Little odd maybe, but good. He talked to me once about his ideas. I listened because I respected him, but I didn't think it would go anywhere. Histro leaned against the boat's rail. My grandfather fished these waters. My father fished them. Now I do, and I'm watching it all die. If there's a way to save it, I want to hear about it. Would you talk to other fishermen? Gauge interest? I can try, but people are scared. Most of us are barely surviving. When someone offers to buy you out, even if it means the end of your way of life, the guaranteed money looks awfully good when you don't know how you'll feed your family next month. They talked for another hour while the girls played on the dock. Hiro introduced Calder to 2 other fishing families who'd tied up nearby. The conversations were cautious, but not hostile. These were practical people who'd been hurt by empty promises before. They needed more than hope. They needed proof. That evening, Calder sat with Bryn on the back porch, watching the sunset. Yuki's nice, Bryn said. She told me her dad might have to sell the boat. She was sad. Maybe he won't have to, because of Grandpa's work. Calder pulled her close. Yes, because of Grandpa's work. I wish I'd known him. Me too, sweetheart. Me too. Later, back in the cavern, Calder found one of Warren's journals from 2015. A passage caught his attention. Today, someone asked me why I keep trying when I've failed so many times. I told them this. Some things matter more than comfort. Some fights are worth having even if you lose, because the act of fighting says something about who you are and what you believe. I believe Ember Bay is worth saving. I believe these families deserve better than slow extinction. And I believe that someday someone will understand and finish what I couldn't. Calder read the words again, feeling their weight settle over him like a mantle being passed from one generation to the next. "I understand now, Dad," he said quietly. "And I'm going to finish it." He opened his laptop and began drafting an email to Hero, outlining the next steps. It was time to gather the families and present them with a choice: accept Tidewater's buyouts and watch their heritage disappear, or take a risk on something that might actually save them. Outside, the ocean kept its eternal rhythm, patient witness to both endings and beginnings. The cavern's single lantern cast long shadows across 40 years of accumulated hope. And somewhere in that darkness, Calder felt his father's presence, not as a ghost, but as a foundation, something solid to build upon. Tomorrow he would take the first real step. Tomorrow he would ask people to believe in something again. It was terrifying, and it was necessary. And for the first time since inheriting the Cliff House, Calder felt like he might actually belong here. The photograph appeared almost by accident. Tucked between pages of a journal from 1970, Calder had been searching for Warren's correspondence with the State Fisheries Department. When it slipped out and landed face up on the makeshift table, it was black and white, edges worn, dated June 1952, on the back in faded pencil. The image showed 15 men standing in front of a weathered building with a hand-painted sign. Ember Bay Fishing Cooperative, established 1949. They wore work clothes and genuine smiles, arms around each other's shoulders, pride evident even through the grain of old film. Calder's breath caught. One of the faces looked familiar. He held the photograph closer to the lantern light and recognized his grandfather, younger than Calder had ever seen him, maybe 30 years old, standing in the center of the group. He flipped it over. Names were listed on the back in Warren's handwriting: Dad, Center, Harold Bergen, Samuel Choi, Patrick O'Sullivan. Ember Bay had already had a fishing cooperative. His grandfather had helped found it. Calder immediately searched through the archives for more information. He found an entire box labeled Original Cooperative, Historical Reference. Inside were documents, ledgers, meeting minutes, and photographs spanning from 1949 to 1974. The story they told was remarkable. After World War II, 15 fishing families had banded together, pooling resources, sharing equipment, coordinating their efforts. For 25 years, the cooperative had thrived. They'd built a processing facility, established direct relationships with restaurants and markets up and down the coast, and ensured every family earned a living wage. The ledgers showed consistent profits, fair distribution, sustainable growth. It worked. Then, in the early 70s, large commercial fishing operations began moving into the region. They had bigger boats, more equipment, and could undercut prices. The cooperative tried to compete, but lacked the capital. Internal disputes erupted over how to respond. Some members wanted to borrow heavily and expand. Others wanted to maintain their traditional approach. The final meeting minutes from April 1974 were stark. Motion to dissolve cooperative passes 8-7. Members will pursue individual operations. Within 10 years, half of those original families had left fishing entirely. Calder understood now what his father had been trying to do. Warren wasn't inventing something new. He was trying to resurrect something that had worked before. His entire research project was essentially an updated blueprint for what Ember Bay had already proven possible. This was the key. Not abstract economic theory, but their own history. Proof that collective action could succeed because it already had. He gathered the photographs and documents and brought them to Petra at the library the next morning. "Look at this," he said, spreading the materials across her desk. "There was already a cooperative here. My grandfather helped start it." Petra examined the photographs, her expression growing thoughtful. "I knew there was something like that when I was very young, but it was before my time. Most people under 50 probably don't remember it at all, but the people who do remember, they'd know it worked. They'd have seen it succeed." Calder felt electricity running through him. "This isn't theory. This is history. Their history. You need to talk to Ingrid Sorensen." "Who?" "She's 79, lives in the old Craftsman on Pine Street. Her father was one of the cooperative's founders. If anyone can speak to what it meant, it's her." That afternoon, Calder knocked on the door of a well-maintained house with a tidy garden. An elderly woman answered, white-haired and sharp-eyed, wearing gardening gloves. "Mrs. Sorensen." "My name is Calder Moss. I'm Warren's son." Her expression softened immediately. "I heard you were in town. Your father was a persistent man. Come in." Her living room was filled with photographs and maritime memorabilia. She served tea in delicate china cups and listened as Calder explained what he'd discovered. "You found the cooperative records," she said. "Warren was fascinated by them. Came to interview me twice, asking about my father's experience. What was it like?" "When it was working." Ingrid's face transformed with memory. "It was the proudest time of my father's life. He'd come home every evening and talk about what they'd accomplished that day. Not just the catch, but the community they were building. Everyone looked out for each other. If one family's boat needed repairs, the others helped. If someone got sick, the cooperative covered expenses. It wasn't charity, it was how things should work. What happened? Why did it fall apart?" "Fear," she said simply. "When the big commercial operations arrived, people panicked. Some wanted to fight by becoming just like them. Big, aggressive, profit-focused. Others wanted to stay true to the original vision. The argument tore them apart. My father voted to keep the cooperative going, but he lost. He never fished again after that. Said it broke his heart to watch everyone scatter. Would it work now, if people tried again?" Ingrid set down her teacup and looked at him steadily. "The question isn't whether it would work. The question is whether people remember that it already did." She stood and retrieved a framed photograph from her mantel. Her father standing beside a boat, young and strong. "Your father understood something important. The past isn't just memory, it's proof. If you're going to convince this town to try again, show them they're not attempting something impossible. They're reclaiming something they already know how to do." Calder left her house with renewed purpose. That evening, with Petra's help, he arranged a community meeting. They posted notices at the marina, the library, the diner, and the post office. The message was simple. Community discussion on Ember Bay's future. Town Hall, Thursday, 7 p.m. He spent the next 3 days preparing. Faye helped him create a clear presentation of the financial structure. Dr. Kim sent a written statement about environmental sustainability, and Calder carefully mounted the 1952 photograph of the original cooperative on poster board, making it the centerpiece of his presentation. Bryn helped him practice, sitting in the living room while he rehearsed. "You keep saying, she observed with the brutal honesty of 8-year-olds. "I'm nervous." "Why?" "You're just telling the truth." Her simple wisdom steadied him. Yes, he was just telling the truth. Thursday evening arrived cold and drizzling. Calder loaded his materials into the truck, and they drove to the town hall, a 100-year-old building that had hosted countless meetings about the community's future. Inside, maybe 40 people had gathered. Calder recognized several fishing families, including Hero with his wife and Yuki. Mrs. Finch sat in the front row beside Ingrid Sorensen. Petra stood near the door, giving him an encouraging nod, and in the back, arms crossed and expression neutral, stood Brent Holloway. Calder's pulse quickened, but he set up his presentation with steady hands. The poster with the 1952 photograph went on an easel at the front. His notes went on the podium. Faye and Petra flanked him, silent support. At 7 o'clock, Petra called the meeting to order. "We're here tonight to discuss alternatives to Tidewater's development proposal. Calder Moss has been researching options based on work his father started decades ago." "Calder?" He stepped to the podium, looked at the faces before him, weathered, skeptical, but present. They'd shown up. That meant something. "Thank you for coming," he began. "I know you're tired of empty promises. I know you've been disappointed before. So I'm not here to make promises. I'm here to show you something you may have forgotten." He gestured to the photograph. June 1952. 15 men standing in front of the Ember Bay Fishing Cooperative. My grandfather is in this picture. Some of your parents or grandparents might be too. Movement in the audience. Older attendees leaning forward, eyes widening with recognition. This cooperative existed for 25 years. It worked. Families made good livings, the bay stayed healthy, and the community thrived. It ended not because it failed, but because people got scared and stopped trusting each other. He paused, letting that sink in. My father, Warren Moss, spent 40 years researching how to bring this back. Not because he was crazy or obsessed, but because he remembered what worked. Because he believed you deserved better than what you've been offered. Calder presented the financial projections, the environmental sustainability plan, the operational structure. He kept it simple, clear, accessible. And he kept coming back to that photograph, proof that this wasn't fantasy. When he finished, an uncomfortable silence filled the room. Then Ingrid Sorensen stood. My father is in that photograph. Samuel Choi. The cooperative years were the best of his life. He always said we were fools for letting it go. An older man in the back stood. My uncle is there too, Patrick O'Sullivan. I remember him talking about those days. Said they looked out for each other like family. More voices joined. People recognizing ancestors, sharing half-remembered stories, acknowledging a past that suddenly felt relevant. Then Brent Holloway stood, and the room fell quiet. This is a lovely piece of nostalgia, he said smoothly. But the world has changed. Fishing isn't viable here anymore. Tidewater is offering you real opportunity, real money, real jobs, not memories of how things used to be. Before Calder could respond, Hero stood. With respect, Mr. Holloway, you've been here 6 months. Some of us have been here our whole lives. Maybe we know better than you what's viable. Scattered applause. Holloway's smile remained, but his eyes hardened. I understand emotion, but emotion doesn't pay bills. Tidewater's offer does. The meeting dissolved into debate, some supporting Calder's proposal, others defending Tidewater's promises, many simply uncertain. It ended without consensus, but as people filed out, several families approached Calder directly. Hero shook his hand firmly. Count me in. I'll help you organize the others. 2 more families committed tentatively. It wasn't everyone, but it was a start. As the hall emptied, Holloway approached. Up close, he was younger than Calder expected, maybe 35, expensive suit, practice smile. Impressive presentation, he said. Your father would be proud. You didn't know my father. No, but I know about him. The man who spent decades fighting reality. Holloway's smile didn't waver. Here's some reality for you. Tidewater has invested millions in this acquisition. We don't walk away from investments. I suggest you think carefully about whether this fight is worth what it might cost you. He walked away before Calder could respond, leaving the implied threat hanging in the damp evening air. Petra touched Calder's arm. He looked worried. That means you're a real threat. Calder watched Holloway's expensive sedan pull away. Through the window, he saw the development company logo on the door. He'd started something now, and there was no going back. The letter was waiting under the front door when Calder came downstairs the next morning. Plain white envelope, no return address, his name typed on the front. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a brief message. You don't understand what you're messing with. Take your kid and leave. This is your only warning. Calder's hands tightened on the paper. The words were simple, direct, threatening. His first thought was Bryn. His second was rage. He checked every window, every door. Everything was locked, undisturbed. Whoever delivered it had simply slipped it under the door, probably in the night. They'd been on his porch, feet from where his daughter slept. He wanted to crumple the letter and pretend it hadn't happened. Instead, he photographed it with his phone, sealed it in a plastic bag and called Mrs. Finch. I need a favor, he said when she answered. Can Bryn stay with you for a few days? I'll explain everything, but I need to know she's safe. An hour later, Bryn was packed and confused. Why can't I stay home? Calder knelt to her eye level. Because I need to handle some grown-up things, and I'll do it better knowing you're safe with Mrs. Finch. Think of it as an adventure. She said something about baking cookies and teaching you to knit. I don't want to knit. Then don't. But humor me, okay? She hugged him fiercely. You'll be careful? I promise. After she left, Calder drove to the sheriff's substation, a small building on the edge of town. Deputy Gretchen Vaughan was the only law enforcement officer permanently stationed in Ember Bay. She was maybe 45. competent-looking, with graying hair pulled back in a tight bun. He showed her the letter. She read it carefully, professionally detached. "Can't prove who sent it," she said. "No signature, generic paper, probably printed at any library or office. I can file a report, but without evidence pointing to a specific person, there's not much I can do. It's connected to the cooperative. Has to be. Probably. But probably isn't proof." She looked at him seriously. "Be careful, Mr. Moss. Document everything. Keep your daughter safe. And if anything else happens, anything at all, call me immediately. That's it. Someone threatens my family and you can file a report? I know it's frustrating. But my hands are tied without evidence." She paused, something shifting in her expression. "Off the record. My family's been in Ember Bay 4 generations. My grandfather fished these waters. I hope your plan works. But on the record, I'm telling you to be smart and cautious." Calder left feeling both reassured and helpless. At least Vaughn was sympathetic, even if she couldn't do much. He spent the rest of the day working with Hero and the small coalition that was forming. 5 families had committed tentatively to the cooperative idea, not enough to make it viable, but enough to begin drafting formal documents. Faye helped them establish the legal framework, bylaws, membership structure, profit-sharing formulas. She worked methodically, explaining everything in clear language, making sure everyone understood what they were building. Dr. Kim sent updated environmental impact assessments via email, along with specific recommendations for sustainable harvest practices. Her analysis showed the bay could support a carefully managed fishing operation indefinitely, but progress was fragile. Other families were wavering, torn between hope and fear. One afternoon, Hero arrived at the cliff house looking shaken. "Holloway came to see me this morning. Offered me a personal buyout, 20% above market value for my boat and equipment. He said it was a limited-time offer. If I don't accept within a week, it goes away." "What did you tell him?" "That I needed to think about it. But Calder, my wife is terrified. We're barely making ends meet. That money would solve our immediate problems. And in 5 years? In 5 years, we'd have no boat, no way of life, and probably couldn't afford to live here anymore." Hero rubbed his face tiredly. "I know that, but fear is a powerful thing. Another family, the Albrights, were also offered a buyout. Soren Albright was a weathered man in his early 50s who'd fished since he was 16. His son wanted to follow him into the trade, but there wasn't enough income to support 2 families on one boat. "Holloway's offer would let me retire with dignity," Soren said during a coalition meeting. "Let my son pursue something with a future. I don't know if I can turn that down for a maybe." The coalition met at Hero's boat shed, a drafty building that smelled of diesel and salt. 7 families sat around a makeshift table made of sawhorses and plywood. Calder presented the updated business plan, but he could feel the doubt in the room. "The numbers work," Faye confirmed. "With proper capitalization and 20 participating families, everyone makes a sustainable living. But you need that critical mass. 5 or 7 families can't make it viable." The meeting ended with more questions than answers. People committed to thinking about it, talking to their families, weighing the risks. As everyone left, Ingrid Sorensen approached Calder. She'd been sitting quietly in the back observing. "They're scared," she said, "and they should be. What you're asking them to do is risk everything on a dream. It's not a dream. It's a plan based on solid research and proven history. I know that, but they don't feel it yet. They need a catalyst, something that shows this is real, not just words on paper." She reached into her purse and pulled out a checkbook. "How much initial capital do you need to get started?" "We estimated about 15,000 for the first phase. Legal fees, equipment repairs, initial operating costs." Ingrid wrote a check, tore it out and handed it to him. $10,000, Calder stared at it. "Mrs. Sorensen, I can't. My father would want this. I'm 80 years old and comfortable. I don't need this money, but Ember Bay does. Consider it seed funding. Show people this is real." He accepted the check with shaking hands. "Thank you. I don't know what to say. Say you'll make it work. Say you'll honor what these families built once before. That evening, Calder returned to the Cliff House, feeling cautiously optimistic. Ingrid's donation changed things. It showed commitment, made the cooperative tangible rather than theoretical. But as he pulled into the driveway, he noticed something wrong. The front door was slightly ajar. He'd locked it that morning, he was certain. Calder approached carefully, pushed the door open wider and stepped inside. The living room had been ransacked. Drawers pulled open, papers scattered, cushions slashed. Someone had torn through the house systematically, searching for something. His father's study was worse. File cabinets emptied onto the floor, bookshelves swept clean, the desk drawers forced open and contents dumped. They'd been looking for Warren's research. Calder's first thought was the cavern. He ran through the house, out the back door, and down the treacherous stairs. The iron door hung open. The lock had been broken inside. Chaos. Boxes overturned, papers scattered, journals thrown aside. Whoever had done this had been thorough, violent, desperate, but as Calder picked through the wreckage, he realized something crucial. The most important documents were missing. Warren's final business plan, the original cooperative records, the correspondence with marine biologists, the financial ledgers. Someone had taken them. His phone rang. A known number. "Hello? Mr. Moss?" Brent Holloway's voice, smooth and cold. "I heard about the unfortunate break-in at your property. I hope nothing valuable was taken." Calder's grip tightened on the phone. "You did this." "I did nothing. But I did warn you. This town has made its choice. Tidewater's development represents progress. Your father's fantasy is the past. The sooner you accept that, the safer everyone will be. You broke into my house and stole my father's research. I have no idea what you're talking about. But I will say this. Without documentation, your cooperative proposal becomes rather difficult to pursue, doesn't it? Perhaps this is an opportunity to reconsider your options. Tidewater is still willing to make you a generous offer for the Cliff House. Think about your daughter. Think about what's best for her." The line went dead. Calder stood in the destroyed cavern, rage and helplessness warring inside him. They'd taken everything. 40 years of Warren's work, stolen in one night. But then he remembered. He'd scanned copies of the most critical documents. They were on his laptop, and he'd emailed summaries to Faye and Dr. Kim. The originals were gone, but the information survived. He called Deputy Vaughan, reported the break-in. She arrived 30 minutes later, documented the damage, took photographs. But her expression told him what he already knew. Without proof linking Holloway to the crime, nothing would happen. After she left, Calder sat in the wreckage of his father's life's work and made a decision. They'd tried to intimidate him, tried to erase Warren's legacy, but they'd failed to understand something fundamental. His father had spent 40 years being ignored, dismissed, rejected, and he'd never stopped. Not once. Calder wouldn't either. He pulled out his phone and called Petra. "I need help. Can you come to the house?" "Of course. What happened?" "They tried to destroy everything, but they didn't, and now I need to make sure they can't try again." He spent the rest of the night with Petra, backing up every digital file, uploading everything to secure cloud storage, emailing copies to multiple trusted sources. They catalogued what remained in the cavern, photographed it all, created redundancy. By dawn, Warren's research existed in a dozen different locations, beyond anyone's ability to destroy it completely, and Calder understood something his father maybe never had. This wasn't just his fight anymore. It belonged to everyone who believed Ember Bay deserved better than corporate conquest. The threat had been meant to silence him. Instead, it had made him certain. 2 days after the break-in, Calder received an unexpected call from a woman named Lainey Cross. She identified herself as a documentary filmmaker based in Portland. "I'm calling about your father," she said. "Warren Moss reached out to me about 5 years ago, wanted to talk about a documentary on small coastal communities. We exchanged some emails, but the project never developed. Then I saw a news piece about Ember Bay's development controversy, and your name came up. Are you continuing his work?" "I am. Or trying to. I'd like to hear more. Small town fighting corporate takeover, that's compelling. But I need a hook, something beyond the usual David versus Goliath narrative." Do you have anything that makes this story unique? Calder thought about the break-in, the threats, his father's 40-year research project. I might. Can we meet? I can be there tomorrow afternoon. After hanging up, Calder returned to the cavern to continue cleaning and reorganizing. Most of the documents had been scattered rather than destroyed, and he'd been painstakingly putting everything back in order. That's when he found the sealed envelope. It had been taped to the underside of one of the file cabinet drawers, a hiding place he'd only discovered when writing an overturned cabinet. The envelope was marked insurance in Warren's handwriting. Inside was a letter, dated 1 week before his father's death, and a flash drive. Calder's hands trembled as he read, "To whom it may concern. If you're reading this, something has happened to me. I pray I'm wrong about what I've discovered, but I can no longer ignore the evidence. During my research into Ember Bay's future, I began investigating Tidewater Holdings' previous developments. What I found disturbs me deeply. 3 years ago, Tidewater completed a similar coastal project in Cascade Bay, Oregon. Official records show all environmental regulations were followed. But I was contacted by a former contractor who worked on that project, a whistleblower with documentation proving otherwise. Tidewater illegally dumped construction waste into protected marine habitat. They falsified environmental impact reports. They bribed a local inspector to overlook violations. The evidence is on the enclosed drive. I've drafted a letter to Tidewater's CEO demanding they withdraw from Ember Bay or face exposure. I'm meeting with their representative, Brent Holloway, tomorrow to present this evidence. I'm not a brave man, but some things demand courage. If anything happens to me, please ensure this information reaches the proper authorities. Warren Moss Calder read the letter 3 times, his heart pounding. He plugged the flash drive into his laptop with shaking hands. The files were meticulously organized, typical Warren. Photographs of illegal dumping. Internal Tidewater emails discussing how to avoid EPA scrutiny. Invoices showing payments to an inspector named in a later email as being cooperative. Environmental reports with side-by-side comparisons showing falsified data. It was damning, absolutely damning. And Warren had confronted them with it 1 week before his fatal heart attack. Calder pulled up his father's death certificate, which he'd found among the house papers. Cause of death: acute myocardial infarction. Place of death: home. No autopsy performed. No investigation. He found Warren's medical records. The doctor's notes from 2 days before his death mentioned elevated blood pressure, and patient reports unusual stress levels. The final entry: advised patient to avoid stressful situations. Prescribed medication for hypertension. Calder's mind raced, connecting dots that formed a horrible picture. His father had evidence that could destroy Tidewater. He'd arranged a meeting with Holloway to present it. Days later, he was dead. Could it be coincidence? A 58-year-old man under extreme stress having a heart attack wasn't impossible. But the timing: he called Deputy Vaughn immediately. She arrived within the hour, read the letter, examined the flash drive contents. Her expression grew increasingly troubled. "This is serious," she said. "These environmental violations could result in massive fines, possibly criminal charges. But Mr. Moss, regarding your father's death, you think I'm jumping to conclusions. I think it's been 2 years. The death was ruled natural. There was no autopsy, no investigation. Even if there were suspicious circumstances, proving anything now would be nearly impossible. But you see how it looks." "I see circumstantial evidence and very convenient timing." "But circumstantial won't get us anywhere in court." She sat back thinking. "However, the environmental violations, those are current and provable. If you wanted to pursue this, the EPA would be very interested. What about my father's meeting with Holloway? There must be some record. I can check, but if it was informal, there might not be. And even if Holloway met with your father, that doesn't prove anything except that they talked." After Vaughn left, Calder sat alone with his father's final letter. The weight of it was crushing. Warren had known the risks, had documented everything carefully, methodically, and then he died alone in this house before he could finish the fight. Mrs. Finch found him there an hour later. She'd let herself in when he didn't answer her knock, concerned by his car in the driveway and the open door. "Calder? What's happened?" He showed her the letter, watched her read it, saw her face pale. "Oh, Warren," she whispered. "You brave, foolish man. Did he tell you about this? About confronting Tidewater? He told me days before he died that if anything happened to him, someone needed to finish his work. I thought he was being dramatic. I thought—" Her voice broke. "I should have paid more attention, should have asked more questions. Do you think they killed him?" Mrs. Finch met his eyes. "I think your father was under enormous stress. I think he was carrying a terrible burden. I think he died of a heart attack. Whether that heart attack was natural or induced by confrontation, by threat, by fear, I don't know. But I know he was afraid those last days. I know something had changed. That evening, when Laney Cross arrived, Calder told her everything. He showed her Warren's research, explained the cooperative plan, described the threats and break-in. And finally, he showed her the environmental violations evidence. Her eyes widened. This changes everything. This isn't just a story about saving a small town. This is corporate corruption, environmental crime, possibly worse. Do you understand what you're sitting on? I understand my father died trying to expose it, which makes it even more powerful. She was already making notes. I can have a crew here in 48 hours. We'll document everything, the cooperative effort, the community resistance, and these violations. This is exactly the kind of story that needs telling. Tidewater will fight back. Let them. Once this goes public, they'll be too busy defending themselves to threaten anyone. She looked at him seriously. Are you ready for this? Once we start filming, there's no going back. This becomes national news. Your life changes. Calder thought about his father, about 40 years of solitary struggle. About Bryn, about the fishing families, about a town worth saving. I'm ready. The next 2 days moved with stunning speed. Laney returned with a small crew and began filming. They interviewed Calder, Mrs. Finch, Petra, Hero, and other coalition members. They documented the cavern, Warren's research, the cooperative plan, and most importantly, they sent the environmental violations evidence to the EPA with a formal complaint. 3 days later, the EPA announced a preliminary investigation into Tidewater Holdings' Oregon project. The news made regional headlines. Suddenly, Ember Bay's struggle had context, a pattern of corporate malfeasance rather than an isolated development dispute. Calder called a second community meeting. This time, 70 people showed up. He stood before them and told the full story. His father's decades of research, the historical cooperative, the viable business plan, and finally, Warren's discovery of Tidewater's crimes and his death shortly after confronting them. I can't prove they killed him, Calder said, but I can prove they're willing to break laws, falsify reports, and destroy ecosystems for profit. And I can prove my father spent his life trying to give you an alternative. He presented Warren's evidence publicly, showed the EPA's investigation announcement, and laid out the choice clearly. Tidewater offers money now and uncertainty later. The cooperative offers modest income, hard work, and the chance to save what your grandparents built. I'm not going to tell you which to choose, but I will tell you this. My father died believing you deserved the truth. So here it is, all of it. The room was silent for a long moment. Then Soren Albright, who'd been wavering considering Tidewater's buyout, stood up. Warren died for this, he said. I didn't know him well, but no man should die alone fighting for something this important. If he believed in us that much, maybe we should believe in ourselves. One by one, families stood and committed. Not all of them. Some still chose Tidewater's certainty over cooperative risk. But by the end of the meeting, 23 families had pledged to join. 23, exactly the number needed to make it viable. Hero was elected interim president. Calder declined leadership, insisting this had to belong to the fishing families themselves. As people filed out, energized and determined, Brent Holloway stood in the back, his practiced smile gone, replaced by cold calculation. Calder met his eyes across the room. The threat was clear on both sides now. This had become war. 10 days after the revelation, Ember Bay became a different place, tense, expectant, divided between those who'd chosen the cooperative and those who'd accepted Tidewater's offers. Laney's documentary crew captured everything. The planning meetings at Hero's boat shed. The families working together to repair equipment and coordinate schedules. The quiet determination replacing decades of resignation. Faye and a volunteer attorney completed the cooperative charter based on Warren's framework. It was comprehensive. Bylaws, membership structure, profit-sharing formulas, sustainability guidelines, democratic decision-making processes. Everything Warren had envisioned, now formalized into legal reality. The signing ceremony took place at the town hall on a grey Saturday morning. 23 families gathered, dressed in their best clothes, treating the moment with the gravity it deserved. Calder had prepared the document carefully, printing it on quality paper. At the top, he'd added a dedication in memory of Warren Moss, who believed when no one else did. The first signature line was marked Founder. Beside it, in parentheses, he'd written his father's name. Hudrow signed first as elected president, his hand steady despite the weight of responsibility. Then one by one the other families signed. Older couples who'd fished these waters for 40 years. Young parents hoping their children could inherit the trade. Widows signing for husbands lost to the sea. Each signature was an act of faith. When everyone had signed, Ingrid Sorensen stood and spoke, her voice strong despite her age. My father helped start the first cooperative in 1949. He always said it was the proudest thing he'd ever done, not because of the money, but because of what it represented. People choosing to stand together instead of falling separately. Today, you've chosen the same thing. Warren Moss would be proud. I'm proud. Now comes the hard part, making it work. The room erupted in applause. Calder felt tears on his cheeks and didn't bother wiping them away. But even as they celebrated, reality pressed in. The town council was scheduled to vote on Tidewater's development permit in 5 days. If approved, the company could begin demolition of the old pier and start construction. The cooperative's existence wouldn't stop that. Tidewater owned the land legally. The cooperative's only hope was convincing the council to deny the permit and instead support the local fishing revival. Petra had researched the 5 council members thoroughly. 3 were sympathetic to the cooperative. They'd grown up in fishing families and understood what was at stake. 2 were solidly pro-Tidewater, believing development was Ember Bay's only path to economic survival. The deciding vote would come from the chairwoman, Lucille Brenner, a retired teacher in her early 60s who'd always maintained studied neutrality on contentious issues. She listens to everyone and makes careful decisions, Petra said during a strategy session at the library. We need to present our case logically, emotionally, and with absolute credibility. Meanwhile, Tidewater escalated their campaign. Holloway held a press conference announcing that the EPA investigation was baseless, driven by disgruntled locals resistant to progress. He presented glossy brochures showing architectural renderings of the proposed development, beautiful, modern, prosperous-looking, and someone, Calder suspected Tidewater but couldn't prove it, began spreading rumors. The cooperative was a socialist scheme. It would fail within a year. Families who joined would lose everything. Calder was exploiting his father's death for personal gain. The ugliness of it wore on everyone. But they pushed forward. Dr. Kim arrived in person 3 days before the vote, declining payment for her consulting work. Your father contacted me 20 years ago, she told Calder. He was doing important work. I'm honored to help finish it. She prepared a comprehensive environmental presentation for the council meeting, documenting how the cooperative's sustainable practices would protect the bay, while Tidewater's development would irreversibly damage the ecosystem. Then came the vandalism. Someone slashed the nets on Hero's boat, drained the fuel tanks, and spray-painted "Give Up" across the hull. Deputy Vaughan increased patrols, but with only 1 officer, coverage was limited. They're trying to break our will, Hero said, surveying the damage. Show us we can't win. But the cooperative families rallied. They helped repair Hero's boat, took turns standing watch at the marina, refused to be intimidated. The documentary crew filmed it all. The solidarity, the determination, the quiet courage of ordinary people refusing to surrender. Calder spent his evenings with Bryn, who'd returned home after the documentary crew arrived. Their presence made him feel safer, more visible, harder to threaten quietly. "Are you scared, Dad?" she asked one night. "Yes," he admitted. But Grandpa was scared too, and he kept going. Sometimes being scared means you're doing something that matters. I wish I'd known him. Me too. But maybe we're getting to know him now, through what he left behind. The night before the council vote, Calder visited his father's cavern one last time before the meeting. They'd installed proper lighting, organized everything carefully, and added the brass plaque Petra had commissioned. Warren Moss Research Archive, in memory of a man who never stopped believing in Ember Bay. Calder read through his father's final journal entry again. "If I don't succeed, perhaps someone will understand what I was trying to do. The Bay is worth fighting for. The people are worth fighting for. I hope I'm remembered not for failing, but for trying." "We're going to finish it, Dad," Calder whispered. "Tomorrow, we finish it." That same evening, Holloway made one final attempt. He appeared at the Cliff House, alone this time, his polished facade showing cracks. "I'm authorized to offer you $50,000, he said. "Withdraw your opposition, convince the cooperative to disband, and the money is yours. You and your daughter could start fresh somewhere else. No, you're being irrational. Tidewater will win eventually. We have resources you can't match. Legal teams, political connections, unlimited capital. This fight will destroy you." Calder looked at him steadily. "My father fought you for 40 years on his own, with nothing but research and hope. He never stopped. I have 23 families standing with me. We're not stopping either. Your father died alone and forgotten. Is that what you want? My father died fighting for something that mattered. He's not forgotten. He's honored. And we're going to prove everything he believed was right." Holloway's expression hardened. "You're making a serious mistake." After he left, Calder stood on the back porch, looking out at the ocean. Tomorrow, the council would vote. Tomorrow, they'd learn whether 40 years of work, a community's hope, and one man's sacrifice had been enough. The waves crashed below, eternal and patient. And somewhere in that sound, Calder heard his father's voice telling him what he'd always needed to hear. Keep going. Just keep going. Tomorrow they would stand before the council. Tomorrow they would present the truth, all of it. And tomorrow, Ember Bay would choose its future. Calder went inside, set his alarm, and tried to sleep. In 5 hours everything would change. The town council chamber was packed beyond capacity. People lined the walls, filled the doorway, spilled into the hallway. Laney's crew had set up cameras with the council's permission, documenting everything for the film. The 5 council members sat at a long table at the front of the room. Chairwoman Lucille Brenner occupied the center position, her expression carefully neutral. Flanking her were the others, 2 sympathetic to the cooperative, 2 aligned with Tidewater. The future of Ember Bay balanced on Brenner's decision. To the left sat Tidewater's legal team, 3 attorneys in expensive suits, leather briefcases, confident postures. Holloway stood behind them, arms crossed, watching. To the right sat the cooperative's representatives, Calder, Hero, Fay, Dr. Kim, and Petra. Behind them, the 23 families who'd signed the charter. Mrs. Finch and Ingrid Sorensen occupied the front row. Bryn sat between them, holding the drawing she'd made, fishing boats on calm water, the sun rising. The air felt electric, charged with decades of accumulated hope and fear. Chairwoman Brenner called the meeting to order at precisely 7 o'clock. Her voice was firm, practiced, revealing nothing of her thoughts. "We're here to vote on Tidewater Holdings' application for a development permit and to hear alternative proposals. Tidewater will present first. You have 45 minutes. Their lead attorney stood, a man in his 50s with silver hair and practiced authority. He approached the podium with the confidence of someone who'd won countless similar battles. For 45 minutes, he presented Tidewater's case. Economic projections showing increased tax revenue. Job creation estimates. Architectural renderings of sleek buildings and manicured landscapes. Charts demonstrating regional economic growth following similar developments. Ember Bay is dying, he said bluntly. You can accept that reality and shape what comes next, or you can cling to the past and watch everything crumble. Tidewater offers prosperity, modernization, and opportunity. We offer a future. He dismissed the Oregon environmental violations as contractor errors fully remediated, with no connection to current operations. He characterized the cooperative as well-intentioned but economically unviable nostalgia. Holloway took the podium for the closing. He'd regained his polish, his smile warm and reasonable. I understand the emotional attachment to fishing traditions. I respect it, but respect doesn't pay mortgages or feed families. Tidewater's development will transform Ember Bay into a destination, a place where your children can find careers, where property values increase, where the future looks bright. This is your last opportunity. Choose progress. When he finished, polite applause came from the Tidewater supporters in the gallery. Some fishing families looked uncertain, swayed by the glossy promises and stern warnings. Chairwoman Brenner called a 15-minute recess. Calder stepped outside, overwhelmed by the weight of the moment. The decades of his father's work, the hopes of 23 families, the future of an entire town, all balanced on what happened in the next hour. Hero found him standing by the building's side entrance. You ready? No, but I don't think I ever will be. Your father did this alone for 40 years. You've got all of us. We'll get through it together. They returned to find the chamber even more crowded. People had called others, spread word. This wasn't just a council meeting anymore. It was Ember Bay's reckoning with itself. Chairwoman Brenner resumed the meeting. The cooperative will now present. You have 45 minutes. Calder approached the podium, carrying Warren's annotated Bay survey map mounted on poster board. He set it on the easel beside him, the decades of careful documentation visible to everyone. Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Calder Moss. Many of you knew my father, Warren. Some of you thought he was obsessed, maybe even crazy. But he wasn't. He was right. He gestured to the map. This represents 30 years of research. Water temperatures, fish migration patterns, sustainable harvest zones. My father documented this ecosystem because he understood something the Council in 1983 didn't. Ember Bay's fishing industry wasn't dying. It was being mismanaged. Dr. Kim presented next, her environmental analysis clear and compelling. She showed satellite images, population studies, water quality data. The bay's ecosystem was stressed but healthy. With proper management, it could support fishing indefinitely. Tidewater's development would destroy spawning grounds, disrupt crucial habitat, and cause irreversible damage. Faye followed with financial projections. She presented Warren's business plan with updated numbers, conservative estimates, realistic timelines, achievable goals. The cooperative wouldn't make anyone wealthy, but it would provide stable, sustainable income for participating families. The question, Faye said, isn't whether this works economically. The numbers prove it does. The question is whether you believe in it enough to try. Petra presented historical context, displaying the 1952 photograph of the original cooperative. She explained how it had succeeded for 25 years, how it had only failed when fear replaced trust. Then Hero spoke. His voice rough with emotion but steady with conviction. I'm a third-generation fisherman. My son wants to be fourth generation. Tidewater says fishing is dead here. They're wrong. What's dying is our will to fight for it. The cooperative gives us that fight back. It gives us control over our own future instead of selling it to people who'll profit and leave. Other cooperative members gave brief testimonies. Each story personal, grounded, human. Not promises of wealth, but commitments to preserve a way of life worth preserving. Finally, Calder returned to the podium. He held up Warren's letter about the environmental violations, the original, in his father's handwriting. Before I conclude, you deserve to know the complete truth. He began reading his father's final letter aloud. Calder's voice filled the chamber as he read his father's words. The room fell into absolute silence. People leaned forward, straining to hear every syllable. When he reached the part about Warren's meeting with Holloway, gasps rippled through the audience. When he finished, he set the letter down and looked directly at the council. My father discovered that Tidewater Holdings illegally violated environmental regulations in Oregon, dumping construction waste, falsifying reports, bribing inspectors. He confronted them with evidence. 1 week later, he died of a heart attack. He produced the EPA letter that had arrived that morning. This morning, the Environmental Protection Agency confirmed their preliminary investigation findings. Tidewater Holdings faces significant fines and possible criminal charges for their Oregon violations. Tidewater's attorneys conferred urgently, their polished confidence cracking. Holloway stood, face flushed, attempting to interrupt. "This is slander." Chairwoman Brenner cut him off. "Mr. Holloway, you'll have opportunity to respond. Mr. Moss has the floor." Calder continued, his voice steady. "I can't prove they caused my father's death, but I can prove they're willing to break laws, destroy ecosystems, and silence opposition. I can prove my father spent his life documenting a better path, and I can prove 23 families believe in that path. Enough to risk everything for it." He played the security footage from his home camera. Holloway's veiled threat about handling the problem. Permanently, more gasps. Deputy Vaughn, standing at the back, took notes. My father's final journal entry said he hoped to be remembered not for failing, but for trying. Well, he didn't fail. We're here because of him. 23 families. A viable business plan. Decades of research. A community choosing hope over fear. Calder looked at Chairwoman Brenner. Tidewater offers money now and destruction later. We offer modest prosperity and preservation of what makes Ember Bay worth living in. The choice is yours. He returned to his seat. The chamber erupted, people talking, arguing, reacting. Brenner gavelled for order. "Mr. Holloway, do you wish to respond?" Holloway approached the podium, composure barely maintained. The Oregon situation was contractor negligence, not corporate policy. It's been fully remediated. As for Mr. Moss's conspiracy theories about his father's death, they're grief-driven speculation without evidence. But his voice lacked conviction. The security footage, the EPA letter, Warren's documentation, it painted a damning picture. The public comment period opened. A line formed immediately. Ingrid Sorensen spoke first, her voice strong despite her age. "My father helped found the original cooperative in 1949. It worked because people trusted each other. Warren Moss spent 40 years trying to restore that trust. I'm investing $10,000 of my own money in this cooperative because I believe in it. The question is, do you?" Others followed. Elderly residents remembering the cooperative's success. Young parents wanting their children to inherit something real. Even some who'd initially supported Tidewater changed positions after hearing the full story. Dr. Carlisle, Warren's former physician, spoke next. "Warren Moss came to see me 3 days before he died. He showed signs of extreme anxiety. He told me he was facing a threatening situation. I advised him to avoid stress. I've always wondered if that situation contributed to his cardiac event. The testimony wasn't proof of foul play, but it supported the narrative of corporate intimidation. Finally, the council asked questions. The 2 pro-Tidewater members tried weakening the cooperative's case, but Fay's numbers held firm. Dr. Kim's environmental analysis was unassailable. The critical moment came when Chairwoman Brenner spoke. "Mr. Moss, what makes you think this cooperative will succeed when similar efforts have failed elsewhere?" Calder stood. "Because we're not starting from theory. We're building on 40 years of research, proven historical success, and community commitment. My father failed not because his ideas were wrong, but because he was alone. We're not alone." Brenner nodded slowly, revealing nothing. She called for council deliberation. The 5 members conferred quietly for 10 minutes while the chamber waited in agonizing suspense. Finally, Brenner gavelled for attention. The council will now vote on Tidewater Holdings' development permit application. Calder's heart pounded. Bryn gripped Mrs. Finch's hand. The 23 families held their collective breath. Councilman Reed. I vote to deny the permit. Councilwoman Park. Deny, 2 votes against Tidewater. Calder's hope surged. Councilman Foster. Approve. Pro-Tidewater as expected. Councilman Warren. Approve. 2-2. Everything depended on Brenner. The chairwoman looked at Warren's map, at the cooperative families, at Tidewater's attorneys, at the overflow crowd bearing witness. I vote to deny Tidewater Holdings development permit. The chamber exploded. Cheers, tears, embraces. The cooperative families celebrated, decades of accumulated fear finally releasing. But Brenner wasn't finished. She gavelled for order. Furthermore, the council votes to grant conditional support for the Ember Bay Fishing Cooperative, pending completion of licensing and regulatory requirements. The cooperative will receive priority consideration for use of municipal pier facilities. More cheers. Hero embraced Calder. Dr. Kim wiped tears. Petra shouted with uncharacteristic enthusiasm. Tidewater's legal team packed quickly, Holloway glaring at Calder with undisguised hatred. But it didn't matter anymore. They'd lost. Outside, media crews swarmed. Laney's documentary cameras captured the celebration. Families hugging, children cheering, a community reclaiming its future. Mrs. Finch found Calder in the crowd. Warren would be so incredibly proud. Calder looked at the sky, stars emerging in the dusk. We did it together, Dad, just like you wanted. Bryn tugged his sleeve. Can we go home now? Calder lifted her up, holding her close. Yes, sweetheart. We can go home. And for the first time since inheriting the Cliff House, home felt exactly right. 3 months later, dawn broke over Ember Bay with the kind of golden light that made everything look renewed. Calder stood on the municipal pier, watching the cooperative's boats prepare for the morning departure. The transformation had been remarkable. 23 vessels, freshly painted and properly maintained, moved in coordinated precision. The boats bore the cooperative's logo, a simple design incorporating Warren's hand-drawn map outline. Each captain knew their designated zone, their sustainable quotas, their role in the larger system. Hero waved from the Kiyomi's deck. See you this afternoon. The boats motored out in formation, purposeful and organized. It was working, actually working. The cooperative's first 2 months had exceeded even Faye's conservative projections. Direct sales to restaurants and markets up the coast generated steady income. Every family earned enough to live with dignity, to plan for futures instead of just surviving. The cooperative had become something larger than economics. It was proof that community could triumph over corporate power, that patient research could outlast immediate profit, that one man's 40-year vision could transform into collective reality. Tidewater Holdings had withdrawn from all Pacifics. Northwest coastal projects, after the EPA investigation, resulted in massive fines and criminal charges against 2 executives. Holloway had quietly left the company, his career in development finished. The threat had simply dissolved, replaced by the cooperative's undeniable success. Calder walked back toward town, passing businesses that had reopened. The diner had expanded hours. The hardware store had hired additional staff. Young families were moving back, drawn by the stability in the story. Ember Bay wasn't just surviving anymore, it was rebuilding. At the library, Petra was hosting a group of high school students studying Warren's research. The cavern had been officially designated as a community archive and educational resource. Students from 3 universities had visited, studying the documentation, writing papers on sustainable fishing models. Warren's work, ignored for 40 years, was now recognized as pioneering Laney's documentary. The Last Stand of Ember Bay had premiered at a regional film festival the previous month, winning the Audience Award. It was now screening in coastal communities across the country, inspiring similar cooperative efforts. Other struggling fishing towns reached out regularly, asking for guidance, wanting to replicate the model. Calder had become an unexpected advocate. speaking at conferences, sharing Warren's research, helping other communities understand that alternatives to corporate development existed. He did it all while working part-time as the cooperative's equipment manager, using his marine mechanic skills to keep the boats running smoothly. The cliff house had been transformed too. Renovated, stable, genuinely feeling like home. Bryn thrived there, confident, connected to the community, proud of her father and grandfather's legacy. Her friendship with Yuki had deepened into the kind of bond that would last a lifetime. And Calder's relationship with Petra had grown slowly, carefully, built on shared purpose and genuine respect. They'd begun spending evenings together, talking about books and history and the future. Nothing rushed, everything authentic. One Saturday afternoon, Bryn mentioned it casually while they were fishing off the rocks below the cliff house. "Miss Petra makes you smile the way you used to. Before Mom left?" "She does," Calder admitted. "Is that okay with you?" "It's good. Grandpa would like her. She takes care of his books." That evening, the cooperative held its first anniversary celebration at the town hall. The building overflowed with families, food, music, and genuine joy. Elders shared stories of the original cooperative, connecting past to present. Young families expressed hope, children running between tables, seeing futures in Ember Bay. Calder was asked to speak. He stood before the community, feeling the weight of the journey, the distance traveled from that first night, discovering the hidden staircase. "A year ago, I came here with nothing, no money, no plan, just a daughter who deserved better and a house I didn't understand. My father left me more than property. He left 40 years of proof that truth doesn't expire, that persistence matters, that communities can save themselves if they choose courage over fear." He gestured to the crowd. Warren Moss spent 30 years being right too early. He never gave up because he knew some things are worth fighting for, even if you never see victory. He planted seeds. With the harvest, Ingrid Sorensen presented the brass plaque they'd installed on the cavern's iron door. It read, "Warren Moss Research Archive, in memory of a man who never stopped believing in Ember Bay." The community gathered at the cliff house for the installation ceremony. As Mrs. Finch secured the plaque, tears streaming down her weathered face, she whispered, "Warren, your life mattered. Your work continues." Later, as sunset painted the sky amber and rose, Calder and Bryn stood at the cliff's edge, the same spot where the journey had begun. The cooperative boats dotted the bay below, returning home with the day's catch. Warren's archive cavern was visible, its door now marked with honor instead of secrecy. "Do you think Grandpa knows?" Bryn asked. Calder pulled her close. "I think he knew all along. He just needed us to catch up." They stood in comfortable silence, waves crashing below, future stretching ahead. The weight of the past had transformed into something lighter. Not burden but foundation, not grief but gratitude. "Dad, what happens next?" Calder smiled, thinking about the other towns reaching out. The students studying Warren's work, the cooperative proving daily that alternatives existed. "We keep going. We honor what he built. We don't let the story end." Below them, the ocean kept its eternal rhythm. The cooperative boats tied up at the pier, families unloading catches, children playing on the docks. Ember Bay looked like it had been given a second chance, or perhaps had finally claimed the chance Warren had been offering all along. In the cavern, Warren's journals sat preserved and honored, 40 years of patient hope now vindicated. His maps hung on walls where students studied them. His research formed the foundation of something living and growing. A legacy, Calder realized, isn't what you leave when you die. It's what you plant that continues growing long after you're gone. Warren had planted carefully, persistently, faithfully. And now the garden flourished. As darkness fell and stars emerged, Calder whispered to the wind, "Thank you, Dad, for never giving up, for showing me what matters, for believing we'd understand someday." The waves answered with their timeless voice, patient and eternal. And somewhere in that sound was peace, for Warren, for Calder, for a town that had learned to save itself. They walked back to the house together. Father and daughter, past and future, joined, ready for whatever tomorrow would bring. Home,